What is up, everyone? It is Let's All Be Llamas Video Productions here with another review, coming back at you, of course. I got my popcorn slightly burnt because my microwave can't actually cook popcorn, even on the preset. It's pretty good. Really excited about today's review because we're reviewing Halloween. This is the unrated collector's edition, I believe. Yeah, Rob Zombie's remake of Halloween, the 2007 film. Obviously a remake of 1978's Halloween from John Carpenter. So, really excited, let's get into it. So we'll start off with the story, obviously. If we can relate it to the previous story from the 1978 film, this one shoves us into the life of Michael Myers, where we only saw about, 2 minutes in a POV mask shot of Michael Myers in 1978. We get to see the full-on Michael Myers as a youth for 40 to 45 minutes. It's in a whole intro piece. So it's actually pretty intriguing. Now, given that it was pretty controversial because a lot of people were like, I like Michael Myers because you don't know anything about Michael Myers. This film gives you a lot more to know about Michael Myers. This film, of course, starts in 45-minute intro of a young lost kid. You're shoved right into this life of a drunk father who's on disability, a mother who only has one career, and that's being a stripper, and that's how she makes her money, douchey sister, a little baby sister, and then yourself, of course. You know, there's certain times where it stings your ears, and it's not very comfortable to listen to. It never really is. So you're introduced to this family where obviously the no one likes each other, pretty much. Laurie, by this moment, Laurie Strode, she's a child, so she actually has no impact on anyone's life at the moment. Michael ends up going to school. Of course, Michael's bullied there. The kid from Spy Kids 3D, actually. This is the first movie I watched that really horrified the shit out of me. I was comforted by the fact that the Spy Kids 3D kid was there, but he's kind of a dick. Pretty much, he's the bully of, the young Michael Myers, and he makes fun of his mom being a stripper and whatnot with another kid that's a fellow bully. And then they get in a fight, and then the principal ends up coming, and so he ends up getting called to the principal's office, of course, because he gets in that huge fight with the Spy Kids 3D kid, who is the bully. And they call in his mom, typically. A psychiatrist also comes in, which is Dr. Samuel Loomis. We're involved in the situation where the principal brings up the fact that Michael has been killing animals and stuffing them in lockers like his cats. He has a series of photographs, Polaroids that are of a bunch of dead animals. So now, of course, we're clued into the reasoning of the motivation of Michael Myers and why he kills people in the first place. He ends up dipping from that, and he finds the kid that, from Spy Kids, of course, that was chirping him and his mom, and he ends up beating the shit out of him with a big wooden stick. And Rob Zombie, again, he likes to go gruesome. I watched it, the first time I watched it, it was tough to watch. I was watching it with a friend not too long ago who hadn't seen the film before, and she was just, she was terrified at the whole act of Michael killing a fellow classmate, of course. So after he does that, he goes home, where of course his mom has to work that night, so she can't take him out trick-or-treating, and she's obviously a stripper, like I said. The drunk stepdad is just a drunk stepdad loser, so he's not going to do it, and he's on disability. His whole left side of his body's fucked up. His sister is a dumb whore type girl in this. She's a generic whore who's in love with this really ugly guy. She's attractive, at least. But the point is that now Michael can't go out trick-or-treating, and his whole hopes and dreams of, being a normal kid are crushed. Now, since he's already killed a kid, and he's sitting outside listening to Nazareth's Love Hurts, he decides, I'm going to kill my family now. So he goes in, duct tapes his dad to a chair, slits his throat. He's a pretty big skid, too. He comes downstairs to make a sandwich for himself, and Michael beats him with an aluminum baseball bat. That one also is pretty gruesome. You can just hear the head trauma. He ends up going upstairs where his sister is. He puts on the mask, which is the iconic mask seen here, which is reincarnated, obviously. It's quite reincarnated. I don't mind it. It looks like it's aged well. Generally speaking, it's a little bit different to the William Shatner mask that we're all used to in the original film. He ends up going upstairs, and the boyfriend that pulled the mask out in the first place to introduce where he finds it and where he claims the mask. The sketchy boyfriend that was beaten with an aluminum baseball bat, he was the one that brought the mask, apparently, for some sort of sex. I'm not sure what kind of sex he was going to do with that mask, to be honest with you. Not to mention that mask was huge for him. I don't even know. Anyways, he kills his sister after he puts on the mask, and it looks huge on him, of course. Deborah Myers ends up coming home, and of course she's the stripper, so she comes home from her late night shift at the strip club, Tao Tai Tavern, probably. and she notices that Michael's sitting on the ledge with Laurie, the child, and immediately Deborah's like, what is going on? So she goes inside to see that her whole family is completely massacred from Michael, and she calls the cops immediately. The cops come, the ambulance comes, and then Michael's evicted right away. And now Michael is held in a penitentiary. I think it goes like 8 months later down the road. He is now at Smith Groves Sanitarium. I'm pretty sure, at least. Dr. Samuel Loomis works with him for 15 straight years. And nothing ends up going really well at the sanitarium. So you're there for about 20 minutes just seeing how he progressively gets weirder and weirder and more of a serial killer, I guess. He starts becoming, his social skills just decline immensely. He starts making masks to cover his face, and then eventually he kills a nurse once again, kind of confirming more or less that Michael will always be Michael and he cannot be saved. By this point, he ends up killing the nurse, and that kind of finalizes everything. Like, it's Michael, he will never be saved, he will always kill people. Now, he killed the family, so I don't know when he was going to be out of jail, or out of, I don't know, I couldn't imagine that he would be out of protective care for some time. I think that he would be behind bars for possibly a lifetime. I mean, he brutally murdered his family. So, I mean, by this point, Deborah goes home and shoots herself in the head when she's looking at old clips of Michael and the old family and whatnot after his final kill. Pretty much everyone's dead except for Laurie, so by that point, Laurie the child, Laurie Myers, we're wondering where she goes off. It goes 15 years down the road, where pretty much now we're at the sanitarium and Dr. Loomis has decided to retire and not take care of Michael because Michael is obviously, there's no progression with his mental state, and he decides to retire after 15 long years of him saying absolutely no words. By this point, we're 15 years down the road of his last killing and his mother's suicide, and he's like a 6'8" giant, like at least like 250. I think it's played by the WWE actor Tyler Mane. He portrays the character quite well, but obviously, like, you look at people like me and you're not going to be intimidated from like a 5'7" guy who's like 130 pounds, 140 pounds. You're going to obviously want some size intimidation, so we're going to want to go with bigger than average. He's supposed to be of general size, just an embodiment of evil. That's why he was given the nickname The Shape, because he's just a shape. You don't know what's inside the character. Now, there's a few alternate versions. I have the version, of course, where two janitors, actually one being Danny Trejo's in the movie. Danny Trejo's in the movie, and he's training a few guards to be guards around the sanitarium because he's going to leave eventually and he's going to retire in a few months. But they end up going in. They have night shifts. There's these two hick security guards that have night shifts at the Smiths Grove Sanitarium. I wish he was a little bit more clever of getting out, because why the fuck would two guards come into one of the most notoriously dangerous cellmates, who again is physically intimidating as hell, and think that you can bang a girl on his bed, rape a girl on his bed at that. And they try to do that, and of course he overpowers all three of them, killing the two of them. I don't know what happens with the girl. Now, and there is another version, which I'm pretty sure it's theatrical. 4 guards are taking him to his room, and he ends up just like getting out and beasting them all and just beating them up. 2 guards bringing a girl to his bed so they can rape her. It's just weird. So eventually Danny Trejo comes in, who's, he's like the lead security guard of this place, and he's been working there for a long time. Now, he tried to befriend Michael when he first came there, when he was 10 years old. I think he was 10 when he first made the killings. And Danny Trejo tries to befriend him, but of course that doesn't really go well, and he ends up killing him. So now he escaped. Dr. Samuel Loomis is warned. Now it goes to Laurie's life, and Laurie seems to be fine. Now, they try to reincarnate a lot of shots from the original film, so of course, like, you're introduced to Laurie, Annie, and the other woman, her other friend, and they're fine. Now, it's still Rob Zombie script, so it's not like family friendly, and it sure as hell isn't like the Halloween 1978 where they're genuine girls that, they're just genuine, and they actually do like doing other things. They have hobbies. They're intellectuals. Like, they actually can speak and articulate well for themselves. No, not these ones. These ones are Rob Zombie. They can't talk about anything other than banging guys and being slutty, and most of the characters in this are pretty stale, other than Laurie, of course. But I mean, there's a lot of the nice walking, when they're walking and it's fall and they're walking down the sidewalks of Haddonfield, and Michael will just be like looking at them or whatever. There was a few shots where they kind of did it okay. It wasn't as good as the original, and Michael's not as good of a stalker in this movie, obviously, as he was in the original 1978 film. But of course, he's a giant in this one. And so now we know that he's after Laurie, we know everything about Laurie. In the second film of in the second Halloween film, that's when we find out that Laurie is actually Michael's sister. There's a few shots where Laurie and Annie and a few of them are at the library, and then she looks through the window and you can see Michael, who's just standing by a tree. Now, I don't know how Michael ended up getting from the sanitarium all the way to to Haddonfield, because the sanitarium is miles and miles and miles away, and they've established in this Halloween franchise, that he cannot drive, which of course in the original one that was a huge controversy with everyone, because he could drive in that. He eventually makes it to Haddonfield, where Dr. Samuel Loomis eventually makes it as well, and he's going chaotic. He's like, "Oh, evil has come here now." Now, given that he's not quite a one-liner like Dr. Samuel Loomis when played by Donald Pleasance, I think that he still portrays the character quite nice. Malcolm McDowell is the one who plays Dr. Samuel Loomis, and I think he actually does the character quite justice. So, carrying on with this film, eventually, he makes it to Haddonfield. He warns everybody about Michael's brutal killing, and he will kill again and whatnot. Dr. Samuel Loomis has actually published a book about Michael called The Devil's Eyes or something like that, and it discusses how Michael is, again, more than human but evil, and drawn by rage and animalistic tendencies, and he ends up massacring quite a bit of Laurie's friends. He has the ghost prank where he puts on the ghost sheets, and he looks way too big. I didn't like any of the locations they shot in. I thought all of the reshoots for if you were to reincarnate the shots, for example, if you go back to the 1978 film and look at the shot where Michael stabs the guy through the chest, and he literally picks him up with the knife and stabs him right through the chest, through the wall, and hangs him up, and he starts staring at him and looking at him. This is obviously the scene before he puts on the ghost sheets. He picks him up and he just shanks him through, and it's amazing. And in the 2007 one, he does the same thing. The nerd boyfriend guy goes up the stairs, and eventually Michael just comes through and then stabs him and then lifts him up and stabs him to a wall. But I didn't like it as much as I liked the original from the 1978 film. I honestly felt like the aesthetics were nicer, the shot was nicer, the blue tone was nice. In this film, it was more grungy. It was definitely way more Rob Zombie, like I've said before. So by the end of the film, he ends up killing most of the people, and then of course everyone's freaking out because they now know it's real, and that they know that Dr. Samuel Loomis wasn't just spouting bullshit through the town the whole time. And Laurie's been captured. Laurie, of course, was babysitting Tommy Doyle. Okay, so she's babysitting, of course, and she's babysitting Tommy Doyle and the little girl, and I can't remember the little girl's name, but obviously that goes to chaos, and Michael ends up killing all of her friends, and Laurie finds out that a lot of her friends are dead, and she's got to get out of there, and she's trying to, save the kids that she's babysitting. Now, Michael doesn't seem to be as subtle in this movie, and he goes right out and he murders people. Now, a lot of them aren't very jump scary. A lot of them, I guess, are just... The scare in this movie is to be brutally intimidated. And it does work to a certain extent, but there's also certain moments where it's like, okay, this is... You can either grow out of it, and the rewatchability won't work with it, because when you rewatch it, you won't have that intimidation from the first time you watched it. It's definitely not a pop-up scare. It's more of an intimidation scare. So he's right in front of you. I guess put your feet in the victim's shoes with Michael Myers' Halloween movies, because it's scarier that way. Michael ends up taking Laurie, his sister, to the Myers house, to the Myers old residence, and I'm pretty sure that's where they are, at least. And he takes her to the basement, takes Laurie to the basement. Laurie ends up waking up from being knocked out unconscious from Michael, and she looks and she sees her best friend lied underneath, the Deborah Myers tombstone. She doesn't know what's going on. Michael ends up coming in the room, demasks himself, which is kind of cool, but you don't see a lot of him. You just see his long, droopy hair, which I like how they covered his face. That's nice, of course, because no one wants to see Michael. Really, people don't want to see Michael. Michael looks like the mask. That's his identity. So Michael ends up pulling out a picture, of course, that he got earlier in the film, and it's of him as a young Michael that we saw previous in the film, and it's of Laurie as a child, again, who we saw previous in the film. Now, he tries to give it to Laurie, but Laurie doesn't understand it. Of course she's not going to understand, because she never saw childhood photos of herself like this, because she was adopted. She was put up for adoption, and of course she was picked up from the Strodes. And now, given that I don't have to tell anybody that, I think most people know, she was a little puzzled at why this massive serial killer was trying to show her a photo. And eventually she's like, okay, the knife, he dropped the knife. So she ends up picking up the knife as he sits there pouting. So eventually Laurie ends up stabbing him in the shoulder. Then there's this big chase down. Dr. Samuel Loomis ends up coming in, puts 2 bullets in him, and he ends up dropping, of course. Now, he gets a few bullets in this movie, but that's not too bad. And eventually she ends up being saved by Dr. Samuel Loomis. They get in the car, and all of a sudden, Michael's alive again, breaks in the car, pulls Laurie out, and takes her to the house again. And then Sam Loomis comes out, and he's like, "Stop, it's me!" And then Michael ends up getting his head, and it looks like he does that very common. He's done it in a few movies too. Obviously, we know how Michael picks people's heads up and he just gradually squishes them. Now, most of them, I'm pretty sure Jason Voorhees does that as well. But Michael's been known to do that. He does a lot of non-stabbing kills. So that's what he did with Sam Loomis. And then, of course, there's another big hide scene, chasing, running, hiding from Michael in the Myers residence, which is like just an old house, so now it's like a warehouse type of idea. So he's just breaking the walls trying to find her, and she's screaming, and it's just, it's ridiculous. So by the end of the film, eventually she's completely worn out, and again, this is an alternate version. I'm not sure, I can't remember which theatrical version happened, because there's a certain one where Laurie lands in an empty pool, and he's walking down, and before he walks down, the police show up, and the police all gun him down. This one, Laurie falls from one of the roofs because she's hiding in the attic. Then she falls down to one of the floors. She gets up and she tries to pull the gun on Michael because Michael ends up entering the room and sees her. But before she's able to pull the trigger, Michael tackles her off the balcony. They fall right off the balcony, knocked unconscious. Laurie wakes up and she tries to pull the trigger on Michael before he wakes up, and then Michael wakes up and grabs her wrist, but then she ends up letting a shot off and shoots him right in the face, so he's dead, inevitably. And that's the way the film ends. I did like it. When I was a kid, I didn't like it. As a Halloween fan, I can understand how people really don't like it. But as a Halloween fan, I also like as many perspectives as you can. Most movies, they try to stay strong with continuity, but I like different perspectives of Michael. If you want to give him more of a reason, that's cool. Don't do it all the time. I think this film works as a perfect spin-off. And if you want to use him as a big, brooding, vulgar villain, then I guess this film is the one you're looking for, because I think it does hit the nail on the coffin for that. I think it does do a really good job. All right, now let's talk characters, guys. Sorry, this review has been really long. Laurie Strode, she was okay in this remake. I think her dialogue was as Rob Zombied up as it could pretty much get. I thought that she was as smart as she pretty much could be written, and she was generally okay. She was pretty cute, but I thought she was just one of those generic people in horror movies that always screams, that always is scared, and she's always making these frivolous noises that it's obvious to where you are now. I can find you. If I'm Michael, I know exactly where you are. So this Laurie, she's bad at hiding, but I'll give her an A-OK for this film. I thought she was pretty good, other than the whining. Michael in this movie, I felt like obviously he went through a lot of different changes. He's now a 6'8" giant who's about 240, 250. His stalking is a little bit off. I feel like him as a stalker, generally speaking, I felt like was a little bit here and there. He could have been a little bit nicer, and could have been approached a little bit differently, much like the original ones where he was just there and he just showed up and he was more like a shape than a person that moved to a certain spot. You know what I mean? So I feel like obviously he's a big guy, so it's going to be hard to do that with someone like that, but I mean, I feel like they made him a little bit too bland for the stalking purpose of the character of Michael Myers. Also, the whole originality of the origin story and bringing him up like that, I didn't mind. I thought it was cool. They shined a light in a different perspective of Michael that none of us have ever seen. A lot of us didn't want. It was a very controversial move, especially to the Halloween franchise and the Halloween fans. But as a Halloween fan, I was totally fine with being blessed with another Halloween movie. Now, given that it wasn't the strongest Halloween movie by far, it was definitely a nice, unique look at the character of Michael Myers. So I thought it was pretty cool, and I thought it gave a little bit more depth to the character of Michael. Now, given, again, that Michael having more background and having a story kind of completely terminates the whole ideology of the character of Michael Myers in the first place, and why he was so efficient and effective in the first film. So yeah, I thought he was generally okay. Dr. Samuel Loomis, it's played by, what's the character's name again? What is that guy's name again? Malcolm McDowell. He's the new Dr. Samuel Loomis, and I believe he was a strong character. Now, given I mentioned earlier in the review, I believe, that he's more of a comedic actor, at least a lot of people have said. I've watched my collector's edition bloopers, and he's in a lot of the bloopers, obviously, and he's a really, really funny guy. He's a really good, he's a strong improviser, especially for humor, but I believe he played the role of Dr. Samuel Loomis quite well, because obviously there wasn't a lot of depth to work with, and it's some big shoes to fill if you're just supposed to be a one-liner who hypes up the scary guy, like Donald Pleasence did with Michael Myers back in 1978. And Donald Pleasence, of course, did the first film, the second film, Return, Revenge, and Curse. He did 5 Halloween films, and I don't believe he even saw the 6th one, which was the last one he did. I believe he passed away before it aired in theaters, so that's a little bit tragic. But I thought he was given more than just one note, because I felt like the Donald Pleasence character, of course, is great, and he's a cult classic. He just doesn't have a lot of depth to him, other than being the guy who's supposed to make Michael seem like an evil entity. I thought the score was a little frizzled. I thought that Rob Zombie kind of went here or there with it. Overall, I thought it was a strong film, and I'd probably give it about a 7 out of 10, which is strong if you want a different look at Michael Myers and to see him shine in a different light. So thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to subscribe, hit that like button, and be prepared for more reviews on Mondays. I'm going to try to do movie review Mondays. I'm going to try to do some web series, of course, with my whole spooky movie web series universe. I'm working on with a lot of my friends, and I'm going to be working on getting a lot stronger equipment, and like I've said, a better setup will be coming soon. So, but the fact that you guys are here means the world to me. Ciao, llamas.